I used to think love announced itself loudly, that it demanded attention, took up space, left no room for doubt. I was wrong. Love arrived quietly, the way a held breath finally releases, and when it did, it carried his name. I noticed him before I understood why. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind that passes without leaving a mark, and I was hiding from the world in a small bookstore cafe. Rain traced lazy lines down the window, blurring the street outside into watercolor shapes. I had my coffee, my book, and the illusion of being untouched. Then something shifted. It wasn't sound, it wasn't movement, it was the unmistakable sensation of being observed, not judged, not consumed, but noticed. My skin reacted before my mind did, a subtle awareness crawling up my spine. I looked up. He stood a few meters away, fingers resting on the spine of a book he hadn't yet pulled from the shelf. Dark hair slightly untidy, like he didn't bother taming it for anyone. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were focused, warm, deliberate. When our gazes met, he didn't look away. Neither did I. The moment stretched, not awkwardly, intimately. Something in his expression softened, and the corner of his mouth curved into a small, almost private smile. Not the kind meant to impress, the kind meant to acknowledge. I felt it in my chest, a gentle, dangerous flutter. He finally broke the silence. "Is it any good?" he asked, nodding toward the book in my hands. His voice was calm, low, carrying the kind of confidence that didn't need to prove itself. "It is," I replied, surprised by how steady I sounded. "But it's the kind of story that stays with you longer than you expect." His eyes lingered on me for a moment, as if weighing the meaning behind my words. "I like those," he said, "the ones that sneak up on you." I smiled before I could stop myself. That was how it began, not with sparks, but with recognition. We talked longer than either of us planned, about books, about the strange comfort of rainy afternoons, about the way time sometimes bends when you least expect it. His name was Daniel. Saying it aloud felt natural, as though I'd always known it. When he laughed, it wasn't loud, it was genuine, unguarded, and when he listened, he really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but absorbing my words as if they mattered. I hadn't felt that in a long time. When we finally stood to leave, the rain had slowed to a mist. Outside, the air smelled clean, electric. We lingered at the door, neither of us in a hurry. "I'd like to see you again," he said, simply. There was no pressure in his tone, no expectation, just honesty. "So would I," answered. His smile deepened, and something warm settled inside me. Our first real date wasn't dramatic. Dinner at a quiet place, candles flickering softly between us, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore, a steady awareness of his presence, the way his knee brushed mine beneath the table and sent a pulse through my body. When he touched my hand, it wasn't possessive. His thumb traced a slow, absent-minded circle over my skin, and the intimacy of that small gesture made my breath catch. I realized then how starved I'd been for this kind of connection, for touch that asked rather than took. His gaze darkened when he noticed my reaction, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me if it's too much," he murmured. It wasn't. It was exactly enough. The first time he kissed me wasn't rushed. We stood outside my building, the city humming quietly around us. His hands framed my face with careful confidence, thumbs brushing my cheeks as if memorizing them. When his lips met mine, the world narrowed to sensation. Warmth, pressure, the soft exhale of his breath against my skin. I felt myself open to him, not just my mouth, but something deeper, something emotional, vulnerable, thrilling. The kiss deepened slowly, his hand sliding to my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. I felt the solid reassurance of his body, the restraint in the way he held me, as if he knew exactly how much intensity I could handle and wanted me to want more. When we finally parted, my heart was racing. He rested his forehead against mine. "This," he said quietly, "feels important." I nodded, unable to find words. It was. After that night, everything felt slightly altered, as if the world had shifted a few degrees to the left, and I was the only one who noticed. My days carried a quiet anticipation now. My phone felt heavier in my hand, charged with the possibility of his name lighting up the screen. Daniel didn't overwhelm me with messages. He wrote the way he spoke, thoughtfully, with intention. When he asked how my day was, he meant it. When he said he was thinking of me, I believed him. We met again a few days later, this time with no agenda. A walk by the river, the city stretched out around us in muted colors. The air was cool, and he offered me his jacket without hesitation. When I slipped it on, his scent surrounded me, clean, warm, unmistakably him. I felt wrapped in more than fabric. We walked close enough that our arms brushed with every step. Each accidental touch sent a small electric reminder through me. I wondered if he felt it too, or if this intensity lived only inside my chest. He stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "You're quiet," he said gently. "I'm just here, with you." Something flickered in his eyes then, something tender, almost reverent. He reached out, his fingers tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was intimate in its simplicity, and I felt my breath hitch. "I like that, being here with you." The first time I went to his place, I was nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. Not afraid, aware. Aware that something meaningful hovered between us, something that deserved care. His apartment reflected him. Warm lighting, books everywhere, music playing softly in the background. He poured us wine, and we sat on the couch, knees touching, conversation flowing easily. But beneath every word was an unspoken pull. When he kissed me that night, it was different, deeper, more certain. His hands explored me slowly, learning rather than claiming. The way he touched my back, my waist, my arms, it felt like a question I was eager to answer. I responded without thinking, my hands finding his shoulders, the solid reassurance of him grounding me. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his forehead resting against mine. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he whispered. I shook my head, unable to form words. His lips curved into a soft smile, and he kissed me again, unhurried, deliberate, the kind of kiss that promised without demanding. That night, we didn't rush. We let the closeness speak for itself, bodies pressed together, breathing in sync. I felt cherished, desired, safe, all at once. When I fell asleep beside him, his arm around me, I realized how rare that combination truly was. What surprised me most wasn't the passion, it was the comfort that followed. Mornings with him felt natural, coffee shared in quiet companionship, conversations that wandered from silly to profound without effort. He saw me, not the version I presented to the world, but the one beneath, flawed, thoughtful, sometimes uncertain, and he didn't shy away from that. He leaned in. One evening, as we lay tangled together, the city lights casting soft patterns across the ceiling, he traced slow circles on my arm. "You know," he said, "this feels like more than attraction." I turned to look at him, my heart suddenly loud. "I was thinking the same thing," I admitted. He met my gaze steadily. "I don't want to rush you or define things too quickly. I just want to be honest about how I feel." "And how do you feel?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He smiled, open, vulnerable, like I've been waiting for you longer than I realized.
Emotions swelled in my chest, warm and overwhelming. I leaned in, kissing him softly, pouring everything I couldn't yet say into that single act. With Daniel, desire wasn't just physical, it was emotional, layered, alive. Every touch carried meaning, every look held promise, and somewhere between his steady presence and the way my heart responded to it, I understood. This wasn't just a story of passion, it was the beginning of love.
Loving Daniel was not a sudden fall. It was a slow descent, deliberate and deep. The kind you don't notice until you realize you're standing somewhere entirely new. Weeks passed, marked by shared routines that quietly stitched our lives together. He learned how I took my coffee. I learned the way he grew quiet when something weighed on him. We spent evenings cooking side by side, music playing low, hips brushing as we moved around the kitchen, as if we'd always done this together. There was an intimacy in those moments that felt just as powerful as anything physical. But desire was always there, steady, patient, alive. Sometimes it showed itself in the way his gaze lingered when I crossed the room. Other times in the way his hand rested at the small of my back when we were out, grounding me, claiming space without claiming ownership. And sometimes, late at night, it surfaced in the quiet urgency of our closeness. One night, rain pressed against the windows again, just like the day we met. We lay in his bed, sheets warm, the city reduced to sound and shadow. His fingers traced my shoulder, slow and thoughtful, as if he were reading a familiar passage and still finding new meaning in it. "You're somewhere else," he murmured. I smiled faintly. "I was thinking about how strange it is, how safe I feel with you." His hand stilled for a moment, then continued, softer now. "I don't take that lightly," he said. "I know what it costs to trust someone like that." I turned toward him, meeting his eyes in the dim light. There was no teasing in his expression, no playfulness, just honesty. "Tell me," I said. He hesitated. Not long, but enough for me to see the decision behind it. "I've loved before, but I didn't always know how to stay, or how to let someone stay with me." I listened, my chest tight with something that felt like tenderness mixed with fear. "And now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "I'm trying to do it differently." His words settled between us, heavy and fragile. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "So am I." Our closeness deepened after that conversation, not just in passion, but in vulnerability. We spoke about past hurts, about the ways we'd learned to protect ourselves. Sometimes those talks were quiet, sometimes raw, but they always ended the same way, with understanding, with closeness, with the sense that we were choosing each other again and again. When we came together physically, it felt like an extension of that trust. Every movement was unhurried, every touch intentional. He paid attention to me in a way that made me feel fully present in my own body, fully aware of every breath, every reaction. And he let me see him too, not just his strength, but his sensitivity, the way his control softened when he trusted me with it. Afterwards, we lay tangled together, limbs warm, hearts still racing. He pressed a kiss to my temple, then rested his cheek against my hair. "This," he said, "is where I feel most like myself." I closed my eyes, emotion washing over me. So do I. Not everything was perfect. There were moments of doubt, days when old fears surfaced without warning. Once, after a small misunderstanding, I pulled away instinctively, retreating into silence. He noticed immediately. "Don't disappear on me," he said gently, not accusing. "Talk to me." It took courage to stay, to explain instead of withdraw. But when I did, when I let him see that part of me, the part that expected loss, he didn't turn away. He held my face in his hands, steady and sure. Here I am, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. Something in me loosened then, something old and tight finally let go. Love, I realized, wasn't just the intensity of desire or the thrill of connection. It was the choice to remain open when closing would be easier.
It was the courage to be seen fully and to see someone else in return. With Daniel, I wasn't just wanted, I was known, and that, more than anything, made me want to stay.
There came a moment when I realized love wasn't only something that lived in the quiet hours or behind closed doors. It followed us into the ordinary, into conflict, into the places where illusion dissolved and truth demanded space. It happened on an evening that should have been simple. We were supposed to meet for dinner. I arrived early, like I always did, nerves fluttering lightly with anticipation. Minutes passed, then more. My phone stayed silent in my hand, its dark screen reflecting my growing unease. By the time Daniel walked in, breathless and apologetic, something sharp had already begun to form inside me. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching for me. "Work ran late." Normally, I would have nodded, smiled, let it go. But that night, something old stirred, an echo of being an afterthought, of waiting alone while someone else decided my importance. "You didn't text," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He paused, registering the shift. "You're right," he replied quietly. "I should have." The honesty in his tone disarmed me more than defensiveness ever could. Still, the hurt lingered. Dinner was polite, too polite. Words moved between us, but something essential remained untouched. When we left, the night air felt heavier than usual. At his place, I finally spoke. "It's not about tonight," I said, pacing slowly. "It's about what it brings up for me." He listened, really listened, his expression open, his body still. "Tell me," he said. I did. I told him about the fear of being taken for granted, about how easily I retreated into myself when I felt unchosen. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. When I finished, silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, but full. He stepped closer, not reaching out yet. "I don't want to be someone who makes you feel invisible, and I won't pretend I'll never make mistakes, but I will always want to understand you." Tears burned behind my eyes, not from pain, but from relief. I'm not asking for perfection, just presence. He closed the distance then, resting his forehead against mine. "You have it," he said. "I'm here." That night, closeness returned, not as escape, but as reassurance. We held each other with a quiet intensity, as if reaffirming something fragile but real. His arms around me felt steady, deliberate, as though he were anchoring us both. Later, wrapped in stillness, he traced slow lines along my back. "I'm learning," he said softly, "how to stay even when things get complicated." I smiled into the darkness. So am I. Love changed shape after that. It became less about the rush and more about rhythm, about showing up, about choosing again. We built small rituals. Sunday mornings spent tangled in sheets and conversation, evening walks where we talked about nothing and everything, shared silences that no longer felt empty. One afternoon, sitting on his balcony as the sun dipped low, he reached for my hand. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want you in it." My heart swelled, emotion catching in my throat. "I'm not afraid of the future with you. That feels like something." He squeezed my hand, smiling. "It feels like everything." Looking back, I know now that love isn't defined by grand gestures or constant intensity. It's built in moments like these, where understanding replaces assumption, where vulnerability is met with care. With Daniel, I wasn't losing myself. I was becoming more.
There is a quiet moment that arrives in every real love. A moment where passion softens into something steadier, not weaker, but deeper. I didn't recognize it at first when it came to us. It slipped in gently, disguised as familiarity, as comfort, as the ease of knowing what his silence meant without asking. It was winter by then. Snow changed the city, muffling it, turning everything inward. We spent more time indoors, wrapped in warmth and each other. Evenings blurred into nights of shared meals, long conversations, and the kind of closeness that didn't need constant words. One night, we sat on the floor of his living room, backs against the couch, a half-finished bottle of wine between us. Music played softly, something slow and thoughtful. I rested my head on his shoulder, and he absent-mindedly played with my fingers. "Do you ever think about how strange it is," I asked, "that two separate lives can slowly turn into one shared space?" He smiled slightly. "I think about it a lot, especially with you." I tilted my head to look at him. His face was relaxed, open, no guarded edges. "And how does it feel?" I asked. "Grounding," he said after a moment, "like I'm not just moving forward anymore. I'm building." The word settled inside me, warm and steady. Love with Daniel was no longer about intensity alone. It was about trust that showed up on ordinary days, about the way he checked in when I was quiet, about the way I reached for him when something scared me instead of pulling away. We talked about the future, not in grand declarations, but in careful questions. Where we wanted to be, what mattered to us, what we were afraid of repeating. One evening, as we lay together in the dark, he spoke softly. "I used to think commitment meant losing freedom," he said. "Now I think it means choosing where to belong." I turned toward him, my heart full. "And does that scare you?" I asked. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but not with you." I pressed my lips to his shoulder, letting the moment speak for me. The first time he said he loved me wasn't planned. We were standing in the kitchen, flour on our hands, laughing at a failed attempt at bread. I was mid-sentence when he stopped me, his expression suddenly serious. "I love you," he said, as if he'd only just realized it himself. The room seemed to go still. I felt it then, not surprise, but recognition, like hearing a truth spoken aloud. "I love you too," I replied. He pulled me into his arms, holding me with a tenderness that felt almost sacred, not desperate, not consuming, just sure. Love didn't erase our individuality. If anything, it strengthened it. We encouraged each other's growth, celebrated each other's victories, held space for each other's doubts. With him, I learned that love wasn't something to lose yourself in. It was something to stand in. Now, when I look back to that afternoon in the bookstore, I almost smile at the woman I was then, unaware of what was waiting for her, of the way a quiet moment, a shared glance, could open the door to a life richer than she imagined. Daniel didn't come into my life to complete me. He came to walk beside me, and every day, in small and meaningful ways, we continue choosing each other.